The Dharma is rarely encountered. It's kind of easy to misunderstand that reference, because it's true that the Dharma teachings are rarely encountered. And we're very fortunate to have come across the Dharma teachings. But the Dharma, all phenomena, the way the world works, is continually unfolding right here. So we don't rarely encounter the Dharma of our life. We encounter the Dharma of our life every moment. So just to make sure that we're not confusing the meaning of that. The Dharma rarely encountered encourages us to continue to study the teachings, which are so complete, that have been articulated through so many different cultures and so many different temperaments. Every one of the ancestors was an individual and had their own particular way of articulating their own insights into the nature of this life, all of which come down to the same teachings that the Buddha Shakyamuni laid out. It's a miracle. It's rarely appreciated that here we are. So tonight I wanted to talk about something that Thich Nhat Hanh is calling the 6 harmonies. The Buddha Shakyamuni gave these instructions. They weren't called the 6 harmonies. That's so much the way Thich Nhat Hanh would state this. And the challenge that we always have is how, in a world that's populated at this point by 8 billion and rising, with its endless wars, which have always been going on, were going on at the time of the Buddha. They're always a reason to think that we have to be warring. So how can we understand how to use the Dharma in our own life? We can barely get along in our own family groups, in our local communities, and definitely as a nation. I'm reading a wonderful book that I really recommend called The American Nations, plural, talking about how even from the very beginning we have had many, many different cultural visions for the good life that have been striving against each other. So even in this country right now, what's going on has always been going on. So how do we understand the Bodhisattva way, given the fact that there seems to be a trajectory that we are on that's already many hundreds of years old, thousands of years old, as human beings, a collective misuse of consciousness. I mean, the potential for using consciousness, claiming it, exploring it, and turning it to benefit all of life, not just human life, is here. It's always been here for us. And yet the idea of how do we reach to those who have a different view of what human life is all about, it's a puzzle, actually. But that doesn't mean anything as far as our own aspiration to use our life energy well, to benefit all of life, to claim our consciousness, to claim our own heart energies, and not lose track, not become so habituated to reactivity that we forget that each moment and each interaction, each connection can be nurtured in a way that is healing and wonderful, joyful. So the Buddha had a lot to say about harmony. And over the course of his lifetime, his teaching lifetime, which was about 40, 50 years, he met with endless communities and actually developed the Vinaya, which are the rules for the ordained community. Each time there's conflict in the Sangha. That's how these rules came about. So, no community is without conflict. And no community of individuals is without a difference of view. All of us have different views, depending on our karma, depending on which of the American nations we kind of came up in. So that skews how we interpret what's going on and what we think should be done. We are no exception. But as a Sangha, if we cherish all life, we naturally follow the precepts that are offered us in this tradition, which are all based on the ethics of understanding interdependence, the interdependence of everything in the world. Truly understanding, not just intellectually, but because we directly are present, we see it. We see it in how everything comes forward. And we have a basis for getting along in the Sangha. It's challenging. If we don't have conflict in a Sangha, we should worry. Because that kind of describes a cult. Everybody's kind of going along in the same groove. So we have conflict, but what we're doing with the precept practice is we're learning how to be aware of our own view, be aware of the charge that we carry, and the same is true of the other. And then how do we work with that? So that there comes the basic rule of listening. To maintain connection, even in conflict, we must be willing to listen. And true listening is not crowded out by continually saying internally our own opinion. So each of us is responsible for our own behavior, and we follow the precepts. We follow the precepts, and we are concerned, we carry a concern for how our own behaviors affect others. We depend on others to love, to be loved by, and to practice the Dharma. It is such a treasure to be able to practice Dharma with others. So we protect the Sangha. Hopefully we do that with our communities and our families as well. So the Buddha talked about the 6 harmonies that the members of the Sangha practice. And they kind of keep reverberating back on each other. So they're not actually separate, but they're different angles. So the first is to be harmonious physically. And when he was talking about this, he was talking about the ordained community, a community that lives together. We don't live together, except for, how many hours a week. Some of us who are really regulars, we live together 10 hours a week, or maybe a little bit more. So reflecting the physical well-being of others, sharing a common space. In the Buddhist time, that was sharing the forest and a building, perhaps. We are responsible for keeping ourselves as healthy as we can. It was one of the reasons why we were very careful during the active phase of the pandemic. We keep ourselves healthy. We share breath. We're all sharing the same breath. When we are harmonious physically, we're able to walk in kinhin. If each of us insisted on our own gait, our own speed, we wouldn't be able to do kinhin together. So we agree to inhabit the same choreography in the Zen Center. We don't say, it's really inconvenient and I don't want to. You can be sure that there are things that we do together that seem absurd to you, maybe. I mean, I've been around it so much, I no longer think in those terms, but I remember for a long time, a lot of things that we did were like ridiculous. But the biggest view is to keep everybody moving as one, because there's nowhere else we can train in this way. We can train the mind and our own sensibility to really remember we are one, no matter what we're doing. So you might be able to think of other ways that we cultivate harmonious physicality. We don't push each other out of the way to get first to the table at a meal or through a door. Maybe. There are a lot of ways to think about. But anyway, the beauty of a teaching like this is you can take it and just notice during the day how you create harmony physically with others, whether you're here or anywhere. The next one is to be harmonious verbally, which can be, when we're very stirred up, can be really challenging. We want to use words that will contribute to harmony. And not to mistake this to say, therefore, refrain from having a different view or sharing a different view. Not necessarily, but how it's shared, that's how we work with this particular harmony. Avoiding words that cause the community to break. That's the 10th precept. Avoiding words and actions that cause the community to break. Mostly this doesn't seem to come up, but every once in a while, communities break up. And it's very often, one element of that is, well, it's always elements of non-precept keeping. But definitely speech is involved, gossip, putting other people down. So we want to really think about the speech precepts, because without their guidance, without keeping in touch with that, it makes it harder to practice the Dharma. It's hard to practice concentrated stillness in Zazen if we are filled with rancor and upset. So critical speech, gossiping, putting others down to show off our own superiority. Crankiness, I don't know, maybe. It's really good to own it if you're cranky. Gives other people the opportunity to be kind and help you. Or just give you some space. Blaming speech. Demanding. Craving praise. Or really contributing to the us and them way of sorting out us and them. That's a clique, and actually it's challenging in a Sangha to really, and we have to be very aware of the tendency to form cliques, which are sometimes not particularly known by the people who are included, but are spotted by those who don't feel included. And so looking at what are our inclusive behaviors as a Sangha, and what allows people newly coming in not to feel welcome. And that takes a lot of attention. And it's important for everybody in the Sangha to be aware of that and to connect. When we need something, being free to make direct requests is really important. Not only in Sangha, but totally in intimate relationships. You know, that part of that is not mind reading. But if something is really, if you're having trouble about something that's going on, it's important to identify what is it, what's the source, and who's involved, and how could you be direct and bring it forward in a way that says, I'm not sure how to deal with this. I'm having reactivity. Another thing is to be able to acknowledge our mistakes, which is really, for some people, you acknowledge even things that are not mistakes. You know, you're so caught up in your inner critic that you're constantly apologizing. But for some, it's very hard to acknowledge. You know, if we go around feeling like our claim to self-respect has to do with knowing, I know, I've experienced that, I know. And then claiming our mistakes can be challenging, and it is a practice. And it helps anybody when you own up to things that we're not so skillful. The other part of that is asking for help when we need it. So all of these ways of being honest helps us develop trust in a Sangha so we can relax, because we're only going to be able to practice together if we can relax together. So the next one is to be harmonious mentally. And this has to do with reactivity, how we identify our own opinions, the opinions of others, and how we work with differences of opinion. And mindfully, we do it mindfully. Are you aware when you are in the grip of an opinion? Anybody? Yes? No? Great. We are a really working Sangha. A lot of people don't necessarily, if this has not been pointed out, realize the hold of an opinion. And the other part of that is, just as my opinions, I wouldn't hold them if I didn't think they were really good. And that is the mark of an opinion, and the other person also has that same experience. You know, that's an important one. It's like a correlate to that is, you know, when you're really having a hard time with somebody, picturing them as a baby. So we're thinking, just as I am, they are. This is an important part of mental harmony. And when we see our own habits of mind better, we also notice others' habits of mind. We appreciate that. We appreciate how my habits affect you, your habits affect me. And everybody has a piece of the truth. I might have mentioned this to some of you, but years ago I was part of the Stop Trident campaign, where we got in front of the Trident subs when they were bringing nuclear bombs into the oceans. And the people organizing that action were Catholic workers and Zen Buddhists. And they were really, the discipline of that group was very, very strong. And they said, everybody has a piece of the truth. Don't forget that. So when we were leafleting in front of the Navy Yard in Bremerton, where people were working on these nuclear subs, their livelihood was totally wrapped up in the nuclear subs, and they also felt like they were doing an important work to protect from harm. And so there was a difference of opinion. We had the same intention in mind. We wanted to protect from harm, we all did. And we had different opinion about what was important in order to be able to do that. It was a very potent practice. Very potent. So when we're in a board meeting, and I encourage everybody to attend board meetings because we have a wonderful board here, and we really explore issues, especially when we are not in alignment about some action that we're going to take. We really, really look into it because everybody has a slant that needs to be, we need to be informed by a full, wide, broad, long-term view. And so that's another place for training. So I encourage you to attend. I think this Wednesday we have a board meeting. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit there and listen, but it's really good. Our board is really a working board. And the other part of this harmonious mentally is to really be open to receiving correction, to receiving feedback. Are you willing to have a wider view that includes somebody else's reactions to your own, what you're putting out? Sometimes it's very painful. Feedback can be very painful. That's okay. We can manage. It doesn't have to feed the critic, the ego self. It can help the bodhisattva get clearer about our action, whatever action we're taking. So what is the experience of really being open? And what is the experience when we're caught in reactivity and resistance? That can come up in any number of ways, and also in Sanzen. When we're getting feedback, it can be difficult. And then the other thing about this particular harmony is has to do with mudita. Mudita is one of the 4 divine abidings, and it is when we take pleasure in other people's joy. And especially if we're feeling kind of blue, look around for a friend who's something good is happening to them and take joy in it. It's part of being enlivened and fed by the one heart. Sometimes our own lives are not going so well, but others are going okay, and to take that in. And then there's the harmony of harmonious in the precepts that we keep. And the precepts are all about going beyond self-centeredness, our own self-centeredness. And when we enter a new community, the first thing that we do is we bring ourselves just as we are into the community. And so it's really advisable, of course, to just watch for a while, because every community has its own way, right? And not everybody likes the way we do things. Roles are assigned here, and those who take them on maintain the manner of practice. There are reasons why we do things the way we do, but we are always open to improvement. Not only individually when we step into a new role, but in general. And then I just want to say again, the 10th precept, which Thich Nhat Hanh stated as, don't do anything that will cause the community to break. And the more traditional way of saying it is, do not besmirch, I think this is Aitken Roshi, don't besmirch Buddha, Dharma, or Sangha. Don't put down any aspect of practice, but own that you have your own questions about whatever it is. And that came up, and that continues to come up with the stuff in Zen having to do with monasticism, because there's a big, in the national community, Zen community, there's a big conflict about whether one should become a monastic, and as a monastic, you're the only complete practitioner, as opposed to householders. So we don't want to get into taking, and maybe nobody here is particularly concerned about that, but growing up in this community, I've been very affected by that. And in the course of time, we've developed a very strong group of householder practitioners who are teachers. And it is affecting the way everybody is practicing, which is wonderful. Opening it up. Nice wide gate. So to be harmonious also in the views that we hold means having the same world view. And when thinking about the view that we hold as Buddhists, it's very much in alignment with the Native American view that all of life is precious. It's not necessarily the view of the Christian, European Christian world. But when we come into this practice, one of the things that we may notice is that we are very influenced by human beings are more important or more something than the non-human world. Before I came over tonight, I was having some melon, and I have a lot of sugar ants that seem to just not want to leave. And so a piece of melon had fallen onto the counter, and I noticed that 3 sugar ants came out from hiding and went to the melon while I was also eating the melon, and I realized we really have something in common. We really like that melon, all of us, these little tiny ones and me. I think that's part of the joy of this practice too, is really having these moments where we really appreciate how we and all life arise together. So we share insights and understanding in many ways together as a Sangha. We learn how to listen and reckon with conflict in a way that's helpful. And we share, and it's one reason why we always have a sharing circle at the end. We encourage people to share insights, situations, difficulties. We share with each other. It helps us. And it helps us steer a middle way. And then the 6th one is to be harmonious in welfare, meaning how we share what comes to us as a Sangha, and how we take responsibility for it. So how we all care for a practice center, how much we notice how things are done and help maintain it. And one thing I always look at is whether the cushions are lined up. Everybody can help with that. You can see that before you leave. Are the cushions lined up? You know, the front of the cushion. And that's a little thing. It's no big deal, but it is. You walk in and everything is just beautifully tended. It really helps us. It helps us feel, this is the refuge, maintained by the full Sangha. And also about how generous we are. This is a place to practice generosity with our time. We really encourage everybody to take up some kind of task that supports the Sangha. with our money, the wealth, our energies, and our attention. And these are the ways that we cultivate stability in our practice and wherever we are. We can be counted on. We can trust and be trusted to be paying attention. That's a really big thing to add in the world right now, to be able to pay attention and meet a need that maybe nobody else is looking at, because nobody else is taking care. So this is how we uphold harmony by means of the mind. We're aware and thinking about the welfare of other people, animals, plants, trees. We keep it always in our minds. We don't lose track. Ananda always kept the welfare of the Buddha in his mind. So we do that for each other and for the center and for the practice. We practice first for ourselves. Next, we practice for the Sangha. And then finally, we practice for the Dharma. Because thousands of people have maintained the Dharma for us. And so we need to do that together as a Sangha to make sure that it keeps going forward. We don't lose the treasure because we're careless, because we're not paying attention. So, thank you so much for listening.
For great clarity.